Let him drop. Nobody helps a monster like him. The words snapped through the restaurant like a whip, and the Korean man in the tailored coat swayed as if the sentence had hit him first. He reached for the edge of a table, fingers sliding over polished wood, and then his knees buckled. His body slammed the floor with a dull final thud. A glass tipped, rolled, and shattered. For half a breath, the whole room leaned forward, instinct rising, humanity almost waking up. Then the whispers landed. Mr. Kong chairs scraped back so fast they sounded like panic. A couple near the window grabbed their bags and stepped away without looking at him. A man at the bar turned his face toward the wall like he had suddenly found something urgent to study. Even the manager behind the counter froze with his hands half raised, as if he wanted to help, but feared what help might cost. The restaurant was full of warm lights and holiday decorations, but fear became the strongest thing in the air. People did not see a collapsed man anymore. They saw consequences. They saw a name that made lives difficult. They saw danger on the floor, and they chose distance. Amara Brooks saw what they refused to see. She was a black waitress with a plain apron, tired feet, and eyes that missed nothing. She had learned long ago how to read a room the way some people read books. She knew when someone was bluffing. She knew when someone was hunting. She knew when silence was not peace but pressure. And she knew a medical emergency when she saw one. Mr. Kong's face had gone pale in a way that didn't look theatrical. His breathing came in thin, uneven pulls, like his body was struggling to remember what to do. One hand twitched against the floor. His lips were slightly blue at the edge. Jess, it was not the collapse of a man trying to make a scene. It was the collapse of a body that was losing control. Amara moved before fear could talk her out of it. She stepped from behind the counter and crossed the room with controlled speed. Not running, not panicking, but moving like someone who understood that seconds mattered. She knelt beside him, careful not to crowd his chest, careful not to jolt him. Her fingers went to his neck, searching for a pulse. She counted silently. She watched his chest for rise and fall. She tilted his chin slightly to keep his airway open. A few people gasped as if her kneeling was the real shock, as if kindness had become the most dangerous act in the room. Someone hissed at her to stop. Someone muttered that she would get herself killed. Someone said she didn't know who he was. Amara knew exactly who he was. That was not the point. She lifted her head and told someone to call emergency services. Her voice was clear, firm, and steady. It didn't tremble. It didn't plead. She spoke like the kind of person who had carried responsibility before and refused to drop it now. No one moved. Fear glued everyone to their seats or pushed them backward. They were trapped between two terrors, the terror of helping him, the terror of watching a man die. In the end, most chose the terror that felt safer. Amara pulled her phone out and made the call herself. She spoke to the dispatcher with the calm of a person who had learned to control her tone, even when her heart was pounding. She gave the address. She described symptoms. She listened, then followed instructions. She stayed focused on the floor, on the man's breathing, on the fact that this body did not care about rumors. Then she felt the room shift again. Two men in dark suits stepped forward from the far corner. They had been there quietly, blending in, drinking slowly, watching everything. Now they moved like they owned the air. Their expressions were blank, but their eyes carried the kind of warning that didn't need words. One of them spoke softly, telling Amara to step away. His calm felt colder than shouting. Amara did not look up quickly. She did not flinch. She did not challenge him with bravado. She simply kept her hands where they needed to be and said she would not step back and watch. A man died. The suit's jaw tightened. He leaned closer. The threat remained unspoken, but it pressed against her skin like heat. Amara could feel the room waiting for her to fold, waiting for her to choose safety, waiting for her to do what everyone else was doing. She stayed, because she had been taught what happens when people don't. She remembered her little brother wheezing in the middle of the night, small hands clutching his chest, eyes wide with terror. She remembered the smell of medicine and the way her mother's voice shook as she begged for help that sometimes came too late. She remembered promising herself that if she ever had the power to keep someone breathing, she would not waste it. Mr. Kong's eyelids fluttered. His gaze lifted for a moment and found Amara's face. There was no anger there, no command, no certainty, only surprise, as if he had expected the world to abandon him. And it had, until this one person didn't. His eyes closed again. The suits hovered, tense, scanning the room. One looked toward the entrance, another checked his phone. They were controlling the scene the way they controlled everything, but even they could not rush time. Even they had to wait for emergency responders. Now, when the paramedics arrived, their presence changed the air. Professionals moved in with practiced urgency. The suits stepped back slightly, not out of respect, but because a scene with uniforms and questions was harder to manage. Mr. Kang was stabilized, oxygen placed, pulse monitored. He was lifted onto a stretcher and wheeled out Dot as he passed Amara. The suited men watched her as if they were carving her face into memory. Amara returned to her shift with hands that shook when no one was looking. She wiped the same table twice. She refilled water cups that were already full. Her mind replayed every second, not because she regretted helping, but because she understood consequences. She had stepped into someone else's world, and powerful worlds do not forget interruption. After closing, Amara walked toward her bus stop under a sky the color of wet steel. Her breath fogged. The street was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. She felt eyes on her, a pressure behind her shoulders. A black car waited near the curb. The window lowered just enough for her to see a man inside, dressed too well for this street. His posture relaxed like he had all the time in the world. He spoke her name with certainty. Amara stopped. Her stomach tightened. Fear tried to climb up her throat, but she kept her face calm. The man said Mr. Kang wanted to see her. It wasn't a request. It was a message delivered with a smile that never reached the eyes. The next day, Amara walked into a hospital that smelled like sanitizer and quiet urgency. She was escorted down a hallway by two men who did not introduce themselves. They stopped outside a private room guarded by another suit. The door opened. Mr. Kang lay in a hospital bed, pale but composed, as if collapsing had been a minor inconvenience. Machines tracked his recovery with steady lights. His eyes turned to Amara immediately. He asked why she helped. Amara answered with the simplest truth she trusted. She said a person was on the floor, and she could not live with herself if she walked away. Mr. Kang watched her for a long moment. Then he offered money. Not a small reward, the kind of money that solves problems and creates new ones. He offered it like a test, as if everyone eventually chose a price. Amara did not take it. She told him dignity is not for sale. She told him help is not a contract. The room went still. Even the suits looked unsettled. In Mr. Kang's world, refusal was rare, especially refusal without fear. Mr. Kang did not explode. He leaned back and studied her like she was an unfamiliar instrument, a new type of power. A woman who did not fear him enough to obey, yet did not hate him enough to harm him. Something in his expression tightened, not with rage, but with focus. That was when the obsession began. Not romance, not sweetness. Something colder and more dangerous. Fixation on the one person who broke the rules of his world by treating him like a human being. Amara felt it in the air and chose her next words carefully. If he truly owed her a debt, she said he should repay it in a way that mattered. He should fund a community clinic where people couldn't afford care. He should support kids who lived under broken streetlights and learned fear too early. He should use power to protect instead of control. Mr. Kang's eyes narrowed. He asked what she wanted. Amara thought of her mother's medical bills. She thought of her neighborhood, where help was always delayed and resources always scarce. She thought of how many people had collapsed in private while the world looked away. She told him she wanted safety and access. She wanted something good that did not need her name or his name attached. Mr. Kang said nothing for a long time, dazed. Later, a donation appeared under an anonymous name, large enough to open a clinic that had been only an idea for years. A scholarship fund followed. A community center got security lights and cameras. No press, no speeches, no public credit. Amara felt relief, but she did not relax, because she understood the truth most people refuse to hold. A dangerous man doing good does not erase his past. It does not make him safe. It simply proves that even power can be moved by one act of courage. Weeks later, Mr. Kang returned to the restaurant, walking slowly, men at a distance. The room stiffened the second he entered. Fear returned like an old habit. People stared, then looked away. He did not demand a table. He did not raise his voice. He looked toward Amara and nodded once. Amara met his gaze without bowing her head.